I remember at Camp Blanding one year, we were training the National Guard on how to rappel. And when you go rappelling, they have a really great 60-foot tower there with helicopter skids, and we had all the ropes and checked out the ropes and taught them all the commands. And it's, you stand out on the skid, and you're tight, you got a guy at the bottom who's your belay man, and the belay man, you call out to him as you're leaning back on the skids to rappel, you say, "On belay," and he replies, "On belay," and then you start to come down the rope, and it's always exciting to watch somebody when they come down that rope the first time. General McMillan, who was the TAG at that time, the Adjutant General of the state of Florida, decided that he was going to have this filmed. And so we had this, about a 280-pound E4 go out on the skid, and he was scared to death, and we were making sure we had brand new rope that it would hold. And so this big old farm boy from Panama City leans out and he goes, "On belay, are you ready?" And the cameraman goes, "Yes." And the guy leans back, and we probably watched that video 35 times. You could see him bounce off the ground about 3 feet up in the air when he hit. And luckily, he was fine. But what I want to talk to you today about is making sure that you're listening to the right voices when you go through your budgeting process. You've been in your role as a county commissioner now, most of you, for about 5 months. And I'm sure that, how many of you have already been accused of drinking the Kool-Aid? You know, you ran for office and you came in saying, "I'm going to affect change, I'm here to make a change." And you hear all these different things when you're running for office, and you get on board and you start finding out life as a county commissioner is a little bit more complicated than many of us knew. And the budgeting process is pretty complicated. But there are some general rules that we want to follow. And the most important thing that you do as a county commissioner is not fixing the pothole on the road. It's actually the budgeting process. And you know, you have a very finite amount of funds that you can take and allocate for almost a never-ending amount of requests coming in from your constituents. And so as you go through that, how do we prioritize? One of the first problems you start running into are you have restricted funds. You have funds that are, you know, when you're a citizen and you're looking and you're saying, well, the county's got so many $1 million in reserves, surely they can do this or they can do that. And then when you come on board, you start finding out that's a restricted fund. You can only use it for certain things. Road and bridge funds only be used for road and bridge. You have a lot of money coming in that's paving certain types of roads, but they're tied to state funding or they're tied to grant funding. Your role. Who would like to tell me what your primary role as a county commissioner is? What's your primary role? I'm sorry? Set policy, that's right. Okay, you're a policy setter, and you know you're a local legislator. When you look at setting policy, why do we set policy? What's the primary reason we set policy for?
So the rules are the same for everybody.
Okay, the rules are the same for everybody. I'll tell you another reason. I had a General Wayne Downing was one of my commanders in the Army, and we had a battle drill. So battle drill is, you know, I'd say, General Downing, what are you calling battle drill? So reactive fire, reactor artillery, and he said it's the most basic thing that you do to stay alive and survive. And policies are battle drills for you in a way. It's something that you think out when it's cool, when it's calm, when you don't have everybody pounding on your head to say, I want this and I want it now, and if you don't do it, I'm going to vote you out of office. Okay? That's the importance of policy, is that you've got an opportunity to sit down, work through that policy, and decide, This is smart. This is the way that we want to do business, because when you're starting to look at very controversial things, you're going to have a lot of pressure exerted on you. And you've all had a lot of people that supported you to get elected. And I'm a former county commissioner. I know, I've been there. And you have some that voted for you, and they will support you because they know that you're going to make the very best decision that you can, that you're going to take all the information, you're going to work through it, you're going to assimilate it, and then you're going to make an informed decision based upon your code of ethics, you know, trying to do what's right for your community, taking all things into consideration. Then you have this other group that are your friends, that when you do 22 things right for them, 22 different times they say, Jack, can you do this? Sure, I think we can do that. And they will support you all the way to that 23rd thing that you say, I can't do that. You know, and then they will start making your life miserable. And that's why you want to go back to policy. Policy is your friend. Policy is a lot of times what will save you from your constituents and let them understand this is the policy. This is a well thought out policy. This is a policy that has been embraced by this board and other boards in the past. So that's what we look at. Your role as a legislator. Now, your role as an administrator on the budget is just as critical, because one of the things that will happen is as you go through the budget year, you're going to have people coming to you wanting additional money. And they're going to say, we've got needs. We really need it. And I mean, many, many times it's going to be very, very good needs, things that will make a difference in your community. But you've got to remember that you're administering a budget just like you do your household budget. And while it might be something that really sounds good, consider, was it laid out during the budget year? Has it been vetted against all the other priorities that you have? Because a lot of times you'll have a group show up like the veterans. How many of you want to have very strong veterans groups in your county? Most of us, right? How easy is it to turn down the veterans when they come asking for money? Not easy at all. So what you want to do is make sure that you have a policy in place that says, unless any outside agency comes to the county, if you have not gone through the budgeting process and turned in your request, we're not going to consider your request during mid-year. Okay? Unless it's a 5-0 vote or a 7-0 vote. I mean, there are exceptions, and you want to make sure that you have a policy that will allow you to do that. And then another good thing is you have a public hearing on it, just like you do for any other budget process. Your facilitative role. It's important that you work with your staff and your constituents. And a critical thing as a county commissioner when you're facilitating the budget process is that you consider the needs of all the departments, okay, as well as the constitutional officers. Who usually comes out on the short end of the stick between the constitutional officers and the departments that work for the Board of County Commissioners? Your people, okay? Your people, because we have to fund the constitutional officers. Who do the constitutional officers really work for? They work for the people, but who controls their budgets? Usually it's the state, okay? You only control it by protest, okay? Now, you can lay out the budget and you lay out the guidelines and you say, this is what it's going to be, but, you know, if they say, no, and, you know, the sheriff is usually getting about 60% of your budget at least, we need X amount of dollars. We need it now. Okay, and if you buck me, we're going to make a big deal out of it. Every deputy is going to tell horror stories, and every fireman is going to tell horror stories. You know, public safety is a big deal. So one of the things that, as you're facilitating this, is make sure that you're meeting with constitutional officers behind closed doors as an individual commissioner, that you're understanding what their needs are, but at the same time that you can convey to them what your needs are. Because it truly needs to be a partnership. And most of them will work with you if you try to work with them. Now, what kind of message does it send to your sheriff if you say, we want you to come to the board chambers at our next meeting and talk to us? It's about like, come on down, boy, we want to talk to you. And, you know, they're going to bow up. So when you're talking about your facilitative role, make sure that you're treating them the same way you want to. Your stewardship role. You're the steward of making sure that things are laid out in physically sound manner, okay? And also you're trying to figure out what services you want to provide. Let's see, there we go. 67 counties, 67 different ways of budgeting, okay? When you sit in a class like this, you're going to hear a lot of different things. And you're going to go back to your county and you're going to go, wait a minute. What about this? Well, we don't quite do it that way here. Okay, so be aware of that. There's a lot of different nuances from one county to another county and the way that you put your budget together. Make sure that you know what your funds are. General fund, when you look at the general fund, that is for the entire county. A lot of times you'll have municipal service taxing units that are for special districts or cities that are providing the same services that you are taken out. The other thing I want to tell you about when you look at budgets, a lot of times one of the things that a county commissioner will want to do is they'll say, how are the surrounding counties doing it? Okay? How much are the surrounding counties spending? And that's good, but you want to look at those type of things, or you want to look at similar type of counties, but you may be similar in road and bridge, and you may be very dissimilar in fire protection. You may be similar in engineering, but a lot of areas it doesn't match. For example, if you're a county that is on a major highway, a major interstate like I-10 or I-75, you're going to get a much bigger slice coming back to your county from motor fuel cells. Okay? Doesn't matter that you didn't have any input into where they put the interstate system. It's just a fact of life. And so when you look at the county next to you that's on that interstate, you go, well, how come they're able to build all those roads? You know, a lot of differences. Okay? Do you have unions? Do you not have unions? Okay? How big is your staff? A lot of different things. How much is your clerk of the court spending versus their clerk of the court for the same population? A lot. I mean, I've seen as much as 2 to 3 times more from one place to another. And so you need to be aware of that. And then what you have to do is, as you look at it, say, we compare in this way, we don't compare in that way. And that's where your administrator, your director of budgeting, your different department heads can help lay it out for you. So how do we stay off the reef? How do we stay out of trouble? Well, when you look at the budget, you got to realize it is a legislative act, but it's a tool. And it's a tool that you can use to accomplish the things that you want to. Part of the problem is you've got to work together as a county commission to really try to lay out how are you going to do your budget process. If you make it confrontational between each other, what's going to happen?
We're going to be like Congress.
Yeah, we'll be just like Congress. I mean, you know, one of the most frustrating things that the American people look at is you guys can't work together, okay? And so they want you to be able to work together through this process. You realize it's a tool, and you're not going to be able to get everything you want, okay? You're going to have to try to make sure that you're looking out for your peers. You're going to have to look out for the constitutional officers in this process as you lay out your budget. Okay, so when we look at the different types of budget policies, you're going to look at your revenues. What kind of revenues do you have coming in? And this is going to be based upon what have previous boards done before. Ginger Delagall is going to talk to you, I think right after I do, about revenue sources. And the revenue sources, when you go through it, there's a lot that has to do with how large your county is, what your makeup is, how much of your tax revenue have you already put into place, and a lot of it is specifically tied to a certain action, such as an infrastructure tax, is it a EMS tax or fire tax? Yes, sir, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to pick your brain for a minute. So what if you're just dead broke and you're trying to drink yourself sober and spend yourself to prosperity? What happens then?
That's a good question, because that's
Drinking yourself sober
right.
and spending yourself to prosperity.
That's a very good point, because as I was sitting in the back corner listening to Dr. Z, we don't have the same problem of trying to figure out how to spend a reserve as the state budget does. And so I've been amazed over the past 6 years that a lot of times a new county commissioner will come on board and they'll roll up their sleeves and they'll say, okay, we're going to start cutting the budget. Everybody's been there for 6 to 8 years. We're all looking around going, we're already down to the bone. You know, what you've got to do is we go through a process to where we lay out and determine level of services, okay, classifying what's a mandated service, okay, a lot of them are mandated, what's a critical service, and what's nice to have.
Now, with you saying that, I agree. It's called priority.
Absolutely.
And we got to determine where our priorities are. So, is funding projects that's maybe more special interest instead of funding priorities for the public citizen? That's where you got to determine. Others, you're mandated. What I see is they always go, well, it's mandated.
Right.
Well, the next question I ask is, who says that budget has to be that much?
Sure.
And you always find out it don't have to be that much. It's mandated, but there's no criteria what the budget
Right.
needs to be.
And what drives you on that is when you look at it, you know, you're in control as far as to say, this is what we want your budget to come in. But for example, property appraiser. Okay, property appraiser sends his budget directly to Department of Revenue. He copies you, all right? So if you say, you know, this is the budget guidelines that we give you, and you've busted those guidelines, then it goes to the Department of Revenue and to the governor to say, yeah, the county's right or the property appraiser's right. And so what you've got to do when you lay that out is you've got to determine, is it worth doing that, or is he close enough that you can live with it? Because when you do a challenge, you know, you've probably got as good of a listening ear for a challenge at the governor level than we've had in a while due to the economy. But it does have a ripple effect across other constitutional officers and can affect a lot of things. Hold on just a second. So, but the other thing you're looking at is you're saying, how do you increase your reserves? One of the ways that you can increase your reserves is if you have grants that match up with projects that you want to have done, you can leverage your money. All right? If you're willing, you know, we have a grant, we're a very small county, but we have one of the best grant writers in the state on our staff. And, you know, we make sure that we have a good grant writer and a good grant manager, because you're leveraging funds then. And that's what you've got to look at. You got a little bit of money, how do you leverage your money? When you're looking at road paving projects, how do you leverage that money?
Now, I find out, when I look at it, I see there's always a lot of strings attached to them grants. So you gotta be very careful on picking and choosing what grants you're gonna get involved with, because the long-term liability
Right.
you may end up with
Well,
after you accept.
for example, a Florida Communities Trust grant has a 10-year window that you have to complete all the things that they require you to do. And you can leverage other grants against that. And when you come on board, you know, make sure that when you go through a grant that your staff lays out for you what are the hidden costs. Okay, because an FCT grant does have a lot of hidden costs. Road and bridge grants, usually not a big issue. But when you're dealing with Florida Community Trust grants, I know that several years ago, my grant writer, who sometimes can oversell, told the board, well, you know, this is cost-free to the county, and when I did the analysis, over a 10-year period, we're going to invest $750,000 in it. And we're able to show how we could do that with potential grants, but you as a county commissioner always need to know that grants might not always be there, and we warned our board on that case, and that's exactly what happened. We went into the recession and lost out. But you know, make sure that you've got an investment planning grant, okay? You've got a debt grant. Make sure that you maintain a health reserve. One of the most important things you can do is protect your reserves. A lot of people will look at, and don't just have a general fund reserve, have other reserves within the individual budgets, okay? Because if you cut your reserve too fine, you're going to have something that will happen that you'll get into trouble. For example, hurricane season comes, and everybody, you know, when you have an event during hurricane season, you're going to declare a state of emergency and start repairing things, hoping that the federal government is going to pay you back, hoping that the state is going to pay you back. And they may not do that. And so if you cut your reserves too thin, then you could place your county at risk.
So what do you think is a good formula for reserves, rule of thumb?
Between 5% and 7%.
On your reserves, 5
Yeah.
and 7, you said?
Yeah. Level of service, I actually clicked through that. Level of service is one of the most important things that you can determine, and you know, educate your constituents about the level of service. Okay, what's more important to you guys, road and bridge, you know, which comes out of the motor fuel tax, but sometimes you got to take money out of general funds to help do a road project maybe, or your library. Well, everybody likes the library. Okay, so you're going to have to sit there and think: are we open 5 days a week, 7 days a week, 3 days a week? You know, what level of service can you do? Do you go out and do you subcontract out services? Okay, one of your most costly things in your budget is always going to be personnel, salaries, wages, benefits, and you know, how do you do that? So you want to make sure that just because you've always been doing it the same way is not the right answer. Okay. Yes, sir.
I like what you used with the library deal, because we had to cut back on some days relative to the library. But a great thing about that too is you can get a lot of volunteers in the community.
Absolutely.
Service, quote unquote in-kind services that will equal out to the same capacity of monetary use. You
Right.
have some senior citizens who do want to volunteer their time and be able to provide services in a way that can be beneficial to the community.
Right. Another thing with volunteers that you can do is a lot of times you'll have people, if you coordinate with churches and stuff, you'll find out that there are people that are really depressed. I have a young man in my office that helps answer the telephone. He's 32 years old, been through 2 strokes and a heart attack, and going through severe depression and stuff. And I said, look, why don't you come volunteer in our office? It'll help me out. and it'll get you out, and you'll feel like a productive member of society again. He's doing a good job. And I mean, volunteer are a very good way to help reduce your budget, but you can't always depend upon them.
Mr. Jack,
Yes.
on the, well, as far as reserves and the HRS issues, do you have any idea what the insurance increases will be to Obamacare? I've heard as much as twice what we're paying now.
I've heard from 15 to 30% in some cases. It really depends upon, if you've just changed insurance within the last year, your mod rate doesn't have as long for consideration. So if you have a higher mod rate, it may even go up more. So Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act, is going to have an impact. Okay.
But in your county, how are you planning for that? That's what I'm asking. I mean, we know it's
The way that I'm planning that is I'm meeting with every constitutional officer, and I'm saying, okay, what are your needs? You know, this is what we're up against. Okay, we're meeting with all of our county commissioners. We have workshops every month, and we talk about our budget, and we're saying it's going to be another bleak year. You know, we're trying to lay out, are we going to have cuts? If we are going to have cuts, you know, we're already identifying areas that we may have to cut. And so what I do is I try to develop a menu for the board to consider and go in and say, okay, if it's within budget, right now we think our projections for the upcoming budget year are going to be flat. And that's what you want to do, is you want to try to get your property appraiser to give you a projection as quickly as possible, and then you start laying out your budget.
But healthcare, are you figuring an additional 30% for healthcare costs?
We're figuring about 20% right now. Okay, and so we're laying that out and saying, okay, here's going to be the impact. And then, you know, Ginger's going to talk to you guys about things that you've got to do. I mean, other options that you have to do. When your budget, you know, you've got to look at reoccurring cost, okay, and you got to look at things that you're creating, okay, one-time costs. And a lot of times what people don't understand is, well, you can pay money for a new football field or a sports complex. Why can't you hire these people, or why can't you give these people a raise? Well, when you're giving people a raise, that's a reoccurring cost that you've got to have reoccurring revenue to where you can offset. When you're building a baseball field, the reoccurring cost is the maintenance, okay? And then are you using fees to help offset that? So what you got to do is you're going to look at a menu of fees, user fees, special assessments, okay? And you know, one of the things that as Florida Association of County Managers we're working on this year is going back to the government and saying, look, you're telling us we can only spend money in these silos. And what you need to do is give us greater flexibility to where you just tell us we've got X amount we can spend, and then we'll figure out how to spend it. All right? We're getting behind. What runs your butt, you know, revenues, understand cooperation, that's what makes it go through smooth. But when you have your unfunded mandates, if you don't know what those unfunded mandates are, you need to start figuring it out, because we are a sub-element of the state of Florida, and it rolls downhill. And many times I feel like just taking them the keys and saying, here, you come run it. Because, you know, we're truly stuck in the middle. You've got to figure out how are you going to make it work with the little bit of revenue that you've got coming in. And you're trying to do that without raising taxes, you know, in most cases. And then you're going to have to sit there and figure out through your policies and stuff, and try to figure out what would the keys be for you to have to raise taxes. Okay, what is worth raising taxes over? You know, if you answer those before you get into those heated discussions, sometimes it will save you from making a bad decision that you can't recover from. they'll be talking more about this later on about the different documents, but you know, you have a lot of things that people throw rocks at you at. But the most important thing that you're going to do is this budget process. Look at your historical trends. Know your community. Your county is different than any other county. What's important to your people is what's going to be important to your budget. And you know, if you need a new road, you know, you've got to make sure that you're educating your people. Okay, we can do it. We can spend our money here, or we can spend our money over here, and try to get a good sense from your constituents, which is more important to you. And then when you sit down with your colleagues on the board, you know, you're going to represent your colleagues, but then you're trying to figure out what's most important, and then the staff's going to come back and say, we've got these needs. You know, all of your counties, most of your counties have been putting off a lot of capital projects and capital purchases, you know, to try to budget your balance and balance your budget. And you're still probably going to have to do that for a while. Some counties are actually getting into a better position, but it's different from one county to the next. Don't overestimate. You know, do not spend reserves on recurring expense unless you can possibly help it. And if you do, make sure you understand what you're getting into. It's like a cancer. Micromanagement. Trust your staff, work with your staff. One of the things I would tell you is I can do an awful lot for you if you allow me to. If you micromanage me, I'll go find another job. Okay? And your staff, I mean, you want to hold them accountable. You want to make sure that they know what they're doing. But, you know, give them the opportunity. You meet with them on a regular basis, pick their brain, ask them questions and stuff. Remember that your departments normally are cut deeper. Normally what I've seen in all the counties, and I'm the chairman of the Florida Association of County Managers, and talking to all the counties, it's the same thing. You know, the board comes out and says, we need to cut 10%. Well, the supervisor of election, she can't cut but 2 because or can't cut any because she's got an election coming up. She's got mandated expenses for new voting equipment. You go to the sheriff's department, he wants a 2% increase. You know, and he's doing everything he can just to get away with that. So then when you come out with how are you going to make that 10% cut that you've got to make so that you don't raise taxes, a lot of times you're cutting your own departments 15 to 20%. And that adds up over a period of time. We're out of time. I'm sorry. All right, 5 more minutes. That's pet projects. Watch out for pet projects. But believe me, every county commissioner has a pet project, and sometimes, you know, you need to record yourself and play it back because you've drank in the Kool-Aid, and you'll be sitting there saying, "We've got to have this. It's important," and your peers are sitting there saying, "What are you talking about?" You know, but you've gotten a lot of pressure that you do a certain thing. So look at your policies, try to think through it, and say, am I doing this just because of political pressure, or is this the right thing to do? All right, because if you do that, your peers will respect you, and so when they have their pet project that they're throwing out and you're sitting there scratching your head, you can say, well, wait a minute, you know, I've got this other pet project, you've got this, let's talk about this. This is not really where we need to be. Plan for the worst case scenario, all right? Often we look at things through rose-colored glasses, and you need to understand as you're going through, you know, laying out your policies that you consider, how do we keep ourselves from getting in this worst case scenario? When you're laying out your budget, okay, what happens if revenue doesn't come in the way that we're thinking? I mean, one of the things we looked at, you know, during the recession, projected taxes didn't come in, all right? So how do you plan for that? If you don't have adequate reserves, if you've spent your reserves, you're in trouble. New recurring costs. You know, make sure you've got revenue to cover it. You know, one of the things that you've got to understand too is you've got to have a dedicated revenue stream. You know, make sure that you're not taking on new reoccurring costs without having the revenue to do it. Storm clouds, affordable health care, baby boom retirement. Look at your retirement that's coming up, okay? Many of you will have policies to where you're paying out tremendous amount of money for sick leave. You know, sick leave should not be a banking account. You know, you'll have somebody that comes in and they work for you for 30 years and they start off at $12 an hour, and when they get ready to retire, they're making $60 an hour. I'd take that bank account any day. You know, what we did in 1999, we drew a line in the sand and said, from now on, you can accumulate as much sick leave as you want, but we're not paying out any more sick leave. Okay? You know, so look at those policies. How much annual leave are you actually going to pay out when somebody leaves? Because as the baby boomers all start exiting the door at the same time, it's going to have a tremendous impact. Make sure that your finance department, your division of budgeting and management knows what that is going to do to you. Because if that's not part of your budget and you're sitting there and you have 30 people walk out the door, that impact is going to create you having to go back to reserves to take out additional money. Increasing replacement costs. You know, it's like ISO with fire. Our fire hose is really good. My guys have done a great job of maintaining it. But the problem is ISO just came out and said the hose that you have on your fire trucks is no longer classified as distribution hose. It's now a TAC hose, and you need to replace all your hose or we're going to lower your ISO rating. It's a big chunk of change. All right. Thank you very much.